So there's lots of like coaching things I will be thinking about depending on what Laura Harvey and I don't know, thanks. Menopause is a killer.
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals. Do you Seattle what I Seattle edition? I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Week 3 is in the books. Instead of some 1-1 draws, we swapped those out for some 0-0 draws. And here we are. I think I've talked about the Gini coefficient on the show before. It's an economic tool to measure income inequality, but you can use it in sports tables to see just how much parity is in a league. And if you include all 14 teams by points or by expected points, the Gini coefficient right now is like 0.19. It's quite high. It's a level of disparity that we saw by the end of last season. If you take Kansas City, Chicago, and Utah out of it, that Gini coefficient collapses to 0.07. The line separating parity from disparity is about 0.15, so it is that much below our average line.
Early days, and we're definitely dealing with some strength of schedule informing
For sure.
some of this. Kansas City has come out of the blocks absolutely on fire. They're making us look a little bit like fools for not like outright selecting them as our runaway winners, because they look like runaway winners right now. I think that's the game we should start with the whip around. Evan, what are your thoughts on Kansas City at this point after demolishing Utah 3-0?
I mean, I think it just paints a portrait of reality versus expectation for both squads, right? We discounted Kansas City maybe a little bit. Maybe we overrated Utah a little bit. Again, 3 games in, anything can happen, yada, yada. But there is no better exemplar to argue you should have just expected this from the beginning rather than try and talk yourself into a different outcome before the season actually started. If you had told us in November of last year that this was a result that was going to come in week 3 and Kansas City would be sitting on 9 points and Utah would be sitting on 1, we would say that makes sense. That tracks. It's an XG split of 3.3 to 0.3. It's just like what you would think Kansas City would do at home to Utah, who, like, even with their much more limited resources, is playing hurt and rolling out lineups that they don't want to be rolling out. I'm not shocked at all. I was looking at the full list of every shot in our ASA database, and you sort by, XG value top to bottom. The penalties always rise to the top. You can just delete them easily so you can look at non-penalty stuff. I almost deleted a Chewinga shot because it was a 0.75 XG value, which is the shot in the 22nd minute from the game.
You just think about the results on their face. They thwacked Portland 3-1 at home. They went on the road to Rowdy Audi and got a 2-0 win. And they thwacked Utah. They have played at least what we can determine is one good team so far. And Portland is like a little paradoxical, but KC is good, really good. I think as I watch these games with KC, it's not just Chewinga. It's in fact that the team is less reliant on Chewinga because Debinha is back playing at the top of her game. And now Bia's back. It's just everything is open for them. And Michelle Cooper's like beautifully building on last season. They are a scary team to face right now. What is getting lost in all of this is that they're holding their opposition to very limited chances as well.
I know.
Like, they are not just doing it on the offensive end. They are a true two-way team. No real surprise with that one. Let's move on to, let's just get it out of the way. Is Houston Gotham the worst game we will see all season?
Probably not, but boy, is it in contention.
Houston generated 0.1 XG at home, and Gotham generated 0.5 XG on the road. That is dire.
It's one of those things where you want to give, especially now, because I think Fabrice Gautrat's gotten a little bit of credit in the bank on how the season has started. But maybe the graceful lens through which you view this is that still 3 games, they're still working out the kinks. Like Yasmin Ryan played at the 9. Like he's trying out a few different ideas tactically. And Juan Carlos Amaro's teams never start strong. They never have the lineup that they're going to finish the season with in place in March and April. I don't know if this is necessarily representative of Gotham's true talent. We have both sides dealing with analogous shake off the rust, let's find our gear issue. This is a game that can result.
Maggie Graham finally gets a start, and for some reason, Houston goes goalless. Go figure. For me, while watching this game, I was sort of stunned by how stilted it felt. I know we were talking a little bit before we went on air about the relative quality of nil-nils. This is among the direst of nil-nils one can watch.
For sure. And then, of course, Gotham's entire fortunes could change depending on the diagnosis of Tierna Davidson's injury.
If you're a U.S. women's national team fan, or just like a not shitty human, this was a game where you watched a really horrid soccer match and also watched a player potentially long-term injured and walked off.
One who's just a couple of years removed from returning from an ACL tear.
She had the face of somebody who understood the severity of what had happened very quickly.
Yeah. She was up and walking around with a leg brace, but we still don't know what's up. So all best wishes to Tierna Davidson.
Let's move on to the other 0-0 of the weekend. Man, when you get 2 0-0s in 7 match days, that's rough.
And this was the game that we were thinking we'd want to talk about as our featured game. And thankfully, Angel City and Seattle saved us from that misery.
Yeah, really, really brought it. Portland 0, North Carolina 0. Portland is both not terrible and doing some insane stuff.
Do you have some feelings you want to work out right now here?
They are better than I thought they might be, but also they have taken a league high 50 shots.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, and they've taken a .075 XG per shot. They are creating volume of just terrible opportunities. This is the Castellanos index, basically. Kaya Hanks is an interesting signing. They've brought in Mimi Alidiu from Portugal, who seems to be well regarded. They are actively attempting to improve this team in the absence of Sophia Wilson by throwing a lot of bodies at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that's the wrong thing, but it's the approach that they're taking that's madness about how to like create goals with these talented players.
Yeah.
They are not creating anything approaching a quality shot. And on the other end, North Carolina, how are you feeling about North Carolina? I know we were very like mid about them.
We've now had 3 games, so that's a sample. It's a small sample, but it is a sample, whereas we didn't have a sample before. And it's not promising. All of the tactical concerns that you and Kim McCauley had preseason about how Shaw and Sanchez would work together are sort of bearing themselves out. Doesn't mean they can't be fixed. I mean, there's 23 games to go. And interestingly enough, depending on how you want to slice it, like their attack hasn't been that bad, actually. Like they're 3rd on XG. They're basically just like a hair below average on XG per shot. The quality chance, which is the metric that we use that identifies how many shots with an XG value over 0.15 you have, like they're tied for 2nd in the league right now on that measure. So like they're getting good looks, but they're fewer and further between than you would hope. So I don't know.
I think the other thing that is happening here is that their defense is actually giving up a fair amount this year. They are 4th in non-penalty XG against. 4th worst. They're kind of the reverse of the things we feared, but like that defensive regression, again, early days, but...
Well, interestingly enough, last year they got very lucky defensively. Their XG allowed was kind of poor, but their raw goals allowed was quite strong. And they are overperforming that again this year, whatever that means.
I mean, Casey Murphy is good. All right, let's move on and talk Chicago. Boy, Louisville just like can't get a break on correct start times for games.
At home or on the road, it seems the Storms follow them.
I don't know where Chicago gets points in this league at this point.
Somebody on social media made some joke about how every time a Chicago possession gets killed, it feels as if like the camera finds Ludmilla just like holding her head in her hands with frustration. And that's not actually true, but that is certainly the feeling of just like how dire this group is.
Louisville were just miles away the better team in that game. We both believe Louisville is like solidly mid-table and no better than that.
But they didn't look it.
And Chicago, fine, they got thrashed by Orlando, but playing Houston and Louisville, those are games that like last season they were getting 3 points from against that opposition that allowed them to sort of break Evan's brain into the playoffs. And this year, the comeuppance feels very real. I feel like we're looking at a Chicago team that is like, I don't know what the plan is.
There isn't one.
We should do an episode in the future, maybe main feed, maybe Patreon, where we just evaluate the teams that are definitely on quote unquote the 3-year plan and power rank them.
The ones who've actually been on record in public saying this is what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chicago is in that grouping. I see no coherent strategy for them to get anything out of any match.
The other problem is that they're not making their defensive sauce work this time. They gave up a high volume of XG last year, but it was because they just allowed a lot of shots and you couldn't necessarily get good shots off. This year, they are dead last by some margin in XG allowed. They've obviously allowed the most non-penalty goals, and they're a hair below average on XG per shot allowed, which means you are getting good looks against Chicago at the moment. And that cannot sustain itself if they have any desire to be respectable.
Emma Sears got a kind of fluky goal that deflected off Sam Staub and into the net, but the result is deserved. Louisville put up almost 2 non-penalty XG and really kept Chicago to nothing. Orlando, San Diego. I know a lot of people thought San Diego deserved something from that game. I am not in that camp.
Well, they didn't generate shit offensively.
I felt they were opportunistic on their goal, really taking advantage of a set piece. But beyond that, Orlando just sort of metronomically beat them down over time. And it turned into a forced penalty that is the difference in that game. But Orlando is so scary. We talk about KC being scary. Orlando's also so scary.
Yeah, well, I mean, Orlando, interestingly, again, small sample, strength of schedule skewing this, but they are a team who were structured to hit their pressing triggers very often, at the top of their own half, rather than in the attacking half last season. This season, they have not only allowed the least amount of G+ in the attacking third and in the attacking half this year, those numbers are actually negative, which means anything that the opposition is throwing their way in those zones, Orlando is turning it into net positive offense. That's how good their press has been in the attacking areas of the pitch.
Orlando and KC look terrifying, and I think we all expect Washington, who beat Bay 2-0 quite handily at the weekend, to join them when they are fully healthy. Before we get to our big game, Washington Bay. This is another consummate, very workmanlike win for Washington that was game state determined. I thought Geralda's got his tactics right, coming out with 3 at the back.
And he's enjoying that these days, trying to get Morgan and McKeown and Bernal all on the field at the same time.
Ashley Hatch, who we didn't think had a place in Washington this time last year.
She's making the most of a bad situation with all the injuries.
She just offers you target striker work that is really different than almost any other striker in the league offers you.
Yeah, she's a battering ram.
She thoroughly owned Abby Dahlkemper on her headed goal.
And Abby Dahlkemper did not seem to forget it as the game went on.
That's correct. That's correct. Her response was not well received by Abby Dahlkemper.
Mm-mm.
This was an efficient Washington team that is closer to the team we think it is, against a Bay team that, didn't look positioned to go get points on the road to begin with, and whose season isn't going to be affected by losing in Washington once. Not starting Rachel Kundinanji and starting an increasingly looking quite cooked Asisato Schwala. I do have concerns.
That touch you pointed out, I think it was in the 58th, 59th minute, especially when you watch it back in replay, is so egregious, just how sloppy she is trying to cut the ball over in the box to make a pass, and it just completely goes away from her onto the defender's foot. Put in a good defensive shift. At the very least, it was a very effortful defensive shift. But that's not why you pay Asisato Schwala the big bucks.
For one of the best paid strikers in the league, I am worried that time has caught up with her in a very painful way.
And she's 30 now, so this is now the moment.
As a paradigm shift, and maybe this will get us into the conversation of our main gamer, just put a pin in the paradigm shift over age and what it means for a player. Because the striker over 30, I think we're sort of moving into a different era of the women's game where you're going to start seeing a lot of people who a generation earlier could play into their 30s and could have productive seasons being run down just because the quality of play globally has increased, the athleticism, just all of the professionalization that's gone on globally. The first people to be hurt by something like that are older players now up against better trained, more prepared, talented opposition and talented defense.
I think it was Teresa Weatherspoon and Becky Hammond doing some sort of media thing, and they're joking with each other, and because they used to be teammates. And at one point, Teaspoon's like, "Can you imagine us in the 90s trying to play against players in the league now?" And Hammond just like gives her this look like, Jesus Christ, no way. And it's the same thing in the NWSL.
And this is not to say all strikers over a certain age will do that. Depina is having like a renaissance season at age 33. But particularly for strikers who don't have a lot of what I would describe as old player skills. And Asisato Shwala is one whose game is so predicated on speed that you have to describe it that way. Speed and movement.
But the Kundananji foul, there's obviously some debate about the validity of that. What I just really quickly wanted to point out. So, there's the shove. 5 minutes before the shove, Kundananji does the same thing to Gabby Carl, but she's weak side away from the ball and Carl doesn't go down. So clearly Kundananji is testing the waters on how much intentional contact she can make to create separation for herself on Gabby Carl. This is a pattern. And so I think the ref probably got it right.
Gabby Carl understood the assignment, did basically create a screening situation with some dark arts, saved a goal. She kind of took a dive. I think as somebody who played in attack, I would have been furious in Kundananji's position if that had been called, especially because Kundananji is just so much faster and stronger that she's going to win most of those physical battles. But also it's kind of a foul. And Gabby Carl, all you need is a swim move around Gabby Carl there and let her take you down and see what happens. All right, let's go to the game that we didn't anticipate being our game of the weekend, but I actually think ends up being a really fascinating match that did feel like, on some level, an indication of both where these teams are at and where they are headed. So Seattle, Angel City. Angel City wins this game 2-1 at home. Do you feel like that was the fair result on the day?
Probably. I mean, as great as Riley Tiernan's goal was, it was still a header from a cross toward the back of the box. So, it's not necessarily going to be a repeatable skill for you. I mean, as repeatable as Claire Emsley crosses are. So I didn't think necessarily that Angel City was good for 2 goals, but Seattle didn't offer up shit. I mean, the Maddie Darlene dribble shot in the 3rd minute, which kind of caught everybody unawares as they're trying to settle in the game, is the only thing that Seattle really could offer an open play or a non-penalty set pieces in the entire match.
I leaned over to friend of the pod, Fjord, and just said, well, if Angel City's gonna give that kind of hiccup, this actually might be a really high-scoring game. Maddie Darlene, who I thought had a great game, her G+ rating on this game is 70, and that was very aligned with what I saw. She doesn't finish off that chance, but considering that she had no one to play with in attack for long stretches of this game, she actually did stretch the Angel City defense as much as one could hope to, given the isolation she was playing under. She is in as unenviable position as one can be in, but I continue to be impressed by the things that she is offering when no one else is offering jack shit.
And as you say, she doesn't have a choice because they don't have jack shit besides her. If Haidam isn't in the game.
I think this is the correct result. It's probably not the correct scoreline. The correct scoreline is probably 1-0. And all of Seattle's XG comes from one of the softest, worst penalties I've ever seen.
Is that you saying that, or are you just quoting verbatim what Sam Lady said in the press conference afterward?
A absolutely horrific penalty given against us. Normally coaches only complain about that when they lose the game, but that's one of the worst decisions I've seen in the league.
I am both saying that and shocked at the candor from Sam Lady, who will almost certainly be fined for that.
Friend of the show, Sills of Shea Butter FC, was sitting in front of me in the press conference. I posted the quote on Blue Sky. Somebody's quote tweeted it and was like, oh yeah, that's probably going to result in a fine. And Sills just replied, yeah, he offered that unprompted. Nobody asked him about the penalty in the conference room. He was just talking about something else, and all of a sudden he was just like, yeah, that was also one of the worst penalty calls I've ever seen. I was like, Jesus Christ, what a swerve. And also funny because, you won the game, so that's usually not the moment where you gripe about refereeing decisions, but that's how strongly he felt about it.
And I know the rationale for why that was called. I understand it. But when you think of all of the stuff that happens in the box that doesn't go called, and then you look at that penalty, that is a plush down comforter level of soft penalty. That is a goose down penalty. To G's credit, she converts it. Let's talk about this Angel City attack. Like, Alyssa Thompson feels like she's taking a legitimate step forward right now.
We've said it a couple times on the show already. Like, her decision-making in the box was always the thing that she struggled with last year. And she wasn't aided by the fact that defenses rarely had to pay attention to anybody else because Emsley's not getting in the box that often because you want her wide to stretch and whip in crosses. Sydney Leroux is a statue of marble, just not going to move very much. And so you key in on Thompson. But this year, you've got the young rookie Riley Tiernan in the 9, and you have Kennedy Fuller playing underneath them, and there is a lot of interchange happening. And there is a lot of movement, and there's a lot of stuff defenders now have to account for. And when that occurs, all of a sudden, Thompson has more space to play with. But even beyond that, I was watching her in the box last night. You could see the gears turning in her head. Very often she would hit end line and then slow things down, which last year would usually mean she'd try a hopeless shot, or she'd try to take an extra dribble and get dispossessed, or she'd try and hit a back pass or a cut back that would immediately get intercepted and go nowhere. But this extra time that she's using is her figuring out her options and also allowing for the faster, more mobile attacking players around her this year to get into good spots. And it's really, really successful. And I think you pointed out during the game last night that the goal is not the usual Alyssa Thompson goal. It wasn't coming from a 1v1. It's coming from a fucking through ball from Kennedy Fuller through the middle of the box. It was a really pretty goal. It wasn't a particularly high XG chance, but the play that led to that moment is exactly the kind of thing that you want from this group.
Given the shot location, which is really informing the XG chance, it is as optimal a shot as you will ever take from that position, basically.
Yeah, because it's about 16 yards out, so it's pretty deep in the box.
Short of being one-on-one with the keeper, it is as optimal a chance. First off, Kennedy Fuller is also having a breakout season.
It's 3 games and she's 18 years old. We even talked about in the offseason, is this team ready to give her the keys? And it seems like they were ready to give her the keys.
The through ball she plays to Alyssa Thompson is like vision beyond her years good. She is receiving, picking her head up, and scanning and digesting what the defense is doing and playing the ball brilliantly. And then Thompson, who last year would have overrun this chance or dribbled this chance straight into a defender, receives this ball and doesn't take a perfect first touch on it. But then, and this is what I've really seen from her, she's using so much variation in her speed that is allowing...
That's a great way of saying it. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It's not just putting the pedal to the floor every time.
She's doing some Allen Iverson, Croy Bethune shit where the variation, she has the speed, but what she's doing is understanding that it is actually more important to keep defenders off balance than it is to beat them in one particular way. So she receives the ball, doesn't take a great touch, and then just recenters herself and finds the space where she can cut in to get a much better shot. So often last year, her touch before shot was away from goal. It would be wide to get the shot. This year, it's touch into space, into the center of the box. So she makes a choice that takes her from probably being a 0.03 XG chance to a 0.09, 0.1 XG chance. Fantastic. And then has the presence of mind and time to set herself, open her body up, pick the right part of the goal to put this in, and then not overhit it.
The thing that is the story of Angel City's game is that incredible finishing, really elite finishing after, taking shots from maybe okay to not so great chances. They just were hitting the corners and hitting the sides of the goal over and over again.
She is both chopping and Chopining it up in her decision making. She's just one of the best players in the league to watch right now, because not only is she been given the keys to the car, everyone around her is playing brilliantly around her. Angel City's attack, we'll get to this in a point, still isn't generating enough XG per game to make them a serious threat. has laid the template in their movement to materially improve over the course of this season.
Yeah, just to give you some context, so on non-penalty XG, they're sitting 11th in the table right now. On XG per shot, they're sitting 12th. Taking a lot of shots, they're not always taking them from the best spots. In terms of the number of quality chances that they've generated, so shots with an XG value of 0.15 or higher, they're tied for 10th with Chicago and Bay FC. Something I like to track is the amount of possession value you get in your opponent's penalty area and what we call zone 14, which is the central part of the final third, just outside the box. It's also called the danger zone. If you're generating a lot of G+ in those areas, that means you're probably making life very, very difficult for opposing defenders. Well, Angel City is dead last in G+ generated in those zones, which is maybe a little bit of a cause for concern. And then receiving G+, which is the best and stickiest and most predictive component of G+ to measure a team's attacking capabilities, they're a little bit below average. They're sitting in 9th place in the league. They're getting worldies from good finishing, but they're not necessarily getting a high volume or getting themselves into the best spots to take shots.
Angel City also leads the league in box touches. Box touches are the end of high-value possession chains, often. So what I think that they are doing, and you haven't seen them converting these into goals yet.
Or good chances either.
But they are putting themselves in the best possible position, often with long possession or meaningful possession, not on a counterattack, to create shots. They currently are not getting the shots that they'd like to be getting, but have also played a handful of teams that have at times sat a lot of people behind the ball and made shot windows close. So what I'm seeing right now from this team, this is like a great week to talk about them because there are two theories of the case. There is Angel City is bad offensively, and there is Angel City is underperforming but sneakily good offensively, and we will see that turn out, which is further tempered by the fact that Angel City have played San Diego, Portland, and Seattle, none of whom are world beaters.
And they've got a gauntlet to run after the international break.
We're about to learn a lot about Angel City's quality after the international break as they go and play the creme de la creme. My primary concern is just the quality of competition that they faced yet and that this can evaporate. That said, what they were able to do against Seattle in terms of getting themselves into positions to not quite complete the chance they wanted to is often the hallmark of a team that is like still working out the kinks, but doing the right things. And moreover, they aren't giving away the counterattacking chances, bar Maddie Darling's chance in the 3rd minute, that has killed the franchise throughout its history. So if what they are able to do, and maybe this is to the interview that we had with Mark Parsons, maybe this is actually the paradigm they are seeking out, which is control and also pouncing and being very front foot. What they are doing is getting overlapping and underlapping runs at the right times from the right players. They are very mobile up top.
You can see in the passing network this very natural-looking triangle between Riley Tiernan, Kennedy Fuller, and Alyssa Thompson.
This is tempered by the fact I still don't rate Riley Tiernan as like a great striker, but she's mobile and she's doing stuff that's opening up a lot, which is worth a ton. Just isn't going to be reflected in her numbers, per se. All of the off-ball stuff she does is great. That said, I think we're also seeing the value and stability that Alana Kennedy is bringing in defensive midfield. She has not played a midfield that is prepared to run her over yet, but like that will come and we will learn. But you can only play the opponents on the schedule so far. And what Angel City have been able to do is get a lot out of their wingbacks, get a lot out of Kennedy Fuller, unlock Alyssa Thompson's best qualities, and allow her to sort of be the possession fulcrum of the offense. They ended up with 48 box touches against Seattle yesterday.
And remember, league average is 22.
That's a number you'd expect to see when a team is down a man. That's not an 11v11 box touches number so often. It's just that last second decision making that I feel like haven't turned the corner on. But if they do, they're doing a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of like getting themselves into attack. They're put a pin in it, but they're a way more interesting attacking team now than I think either of us had them pegged for from the start.
Go back to Alana Kennedy for a second, because I found it interesting that you felt she's this fulcrum, almost like a steadying presence.
Her immobility does mean that she is dependably in the right spot a lot of the time, because we always know the base of the triangle is in one place. It's allowing Katie Zellum and it's allowing Kennedy Fuller and it's allowing the wingbacks to know that there is an outlet pass centrally available to them at all times. Like that there is just, oh yeah, and Alana Kennedy is there. When you start getting into like quote unquote half court offense, you won't be caught out because Alana Kennedy is providing like that cushion. It will get exploited later in this year when she faces faster strikers. Like Kansas City is a team that will destroy Angel City if they play this way. But Angel City right now is from a borderline-y team to a team that I'm like, well, you got 5 points on the board. Those are 5 points you're going to need. You're probably more of a playoff team than I had thought.
Well, especially given the state of the league right now.
Exactly. Like knowing that the mushy middle, but like inside the mushy middle, I like what they are working on more than what I see from a lot of other teams in terms of build up. It's just the end product. There was a possession yesterday where Angel City had like 6 box touches in a row where 2 shooting windows existed, and it turned into a Riley Tiernan shot falling away from goal from 21 yards. And it was just like, no, not that. Like,
yeah.
But that's fixable. What isn't fixable for lots of teams is stringing together 6 box touches. And so if they're able to take the good and make little adjustments, I think that they are becoming an interesting mid-table team. Now, let's flip the script and talk Seattle for a minute. Oh, boy.
I don't even know where to begin.
Seattle's offense was so dire yesterday, they really could have used Jordan Huitema. They could have used anything. I don't know where this team, bar Jordan Bug, Worldies, or Jess Fishlock rolling back the years for 10 seconds, or penalties they don't deserve. I don't know where this team creates offense.
Even with Fishlock, that midfield is still quicksand. Let's say for the sake of argument that Anna Marina Crnogorcevic and Maddie Mercado were on the bench and the front line was Darlene, Emery Adamas, and Aurelia Mondesir. Do you think it's better that way?
No.
I kind of don't either.
I like it better because I think given the choice between athleticism and not athleticism, I will always take athleticism.
Especially absent anything else.
And this is sort of where the compliment for Riley Tiernan exists, which is to say, I don't know if she has the polish yet to be a good striker in this league, but she's certainly a lot more functional than Sydney Leroux or Messiah Bright were for Angel City, given the system they want to play. That said, Seattle, when they get the ball in transition, unless there is a through ball available, there just isn't like a great plan.
I kind of think that's why Alana Kennedy didn't look so bad yesterday. Because, and I'll concede that there are qualities of her just being sort of a solid presence that is adding value that we might not be seeing quantitatively or even with our own eyes all the time. But those first 2 games, there were moments when Angel City did have to defend in transition, and Kennedy was badly exposed. Angel City didn't really pay for any of those moments, but you could see the reasons why we were skeptical of Kennedy being able to perform at this level as a starting defensive midfielder at this point in her career. But Seattle doesn't offer you any of those problems.
In particular, Angel City could play with a single pivot for long stretches of this because Seattle lacked so much, which allowed Angel City to push forward more aggressively, to chase the win instead of play a more even game. The aged Seattle midfield is really concerning, and I don't see a way out yet.
We're broken records about this, but it's the confluence of forces since the beginning of 2023 when the lineup got older, the ownership stuff threw their budget into flux, and one of their legends was going out the door, and they didn't really do a great job of replacing her. Laura Harvey's new tactical focus since she's returned, like all of those things conspire to get you this stodginess that has been in place for over a year now. And you're right. Where is the help coming? Is the Carlisle group going to open up the checkbook in the summer and get a big transfer from overseas? Do they have the scouting and analytics department in place to go find market inefficiencies outside of the top 5 leagues in Europe? When you have a coach who has become a much more defensively stodgy coach, and then you have an aging, immobile lineup who don't know how to just even create any individual magic when in possession, this is all it's ever going to be. Like, it's a bummer, man.
Well, Seattle is putting up relatively respectable non-penalty XG against and not conceding a crazy amount. It is at the cost of everything else to be league average in defense. That's terrifying. The number of bodies they have to commit defensively to get league average defensive numbers neuters their attack, which is 13th in average non-penalty XG. If Lynn Biondolo is going to be out for an extended period of time, Lynn Biondolo is supposed to be a solve, if not the solve, a solve, and no minutes, 3 games. Maddie Darlene is a rookie and seems to have the ability to run for days to chase down the lostest of causes. I feel for her. Norelia Mondesir has a lot of potential, but that might be a longer project. If you don't have that midfield that can connect these disparate weapons together and get something out of this team, I just don't know where Seattle's goals come from. And we said it, but 3 games in, I'm more concerned than I had been. Not to concern troll, but I am more concerned.
Angel City's defense can get got. They're not impenetrable. Seattle had 3 shots in the box. That's it.
Exactly. And you just look at Seattle's passing network into the final third. Seattle has 6 passes into the box? It's staggering.
4.
God. What did Seattle have to do? You think about the circumstances that Seattle had to play under to limit Angel City to 1 non-penalty XG, and it was at the cost of their entire offense. And bar a penalty, create 1 breakaway chance in the 3rd minute that is more than half of your non-penalty XG, which is terrifying because they were chasing the game for the last 25 minutes of it. They created nothing chasing the game.
Yeah, you look at the game flow after the Tiernan goal, which is late enough that you assume that most of the rest of that time is going to be game state influence, where Seattle has to push and push and push. And they brought on Mondesir in the 61st. They brought on Adames. They brought on big attacking weapons and took out Sam Meza for Mondesir. So that's adding attack rather than it being like for like. And yet you look at that game flow, and Angel City continued to boss the game.
Though not necessarily convert opportunity into shot, get themselves in positions to make this game 3-1. What is the point of not throwing bodies forward when trailing a goal? That philosophical question, Seattle sort of went, I don't know, but I don't feel any responsibility to answer it.
I'll tell you who wasn't in a position to make this 3-1. Kristen Press.
Oh, God. Let's have the Press debate.
A lot of people want Kristen Press to be starting or subbing in earlier than she's been. And they seem to be pretty annoyed with Sam Lady that he's not doing that. The crowd reaction when she came on, and then when she, quote unquote, scored her goal, really underscored that fact. She is Angel City's superstar. She hasn't played very much since June of 2022. There's a lot of pent-up energy. Is she good enough, and is Sam Lady stupid enough that this is a bad decision to be bringing her in for cleanup minutes at the end of games? I don't think it is.
What even is good Kristen Press?
That's it. We don't know anymore.
Does she have the reputation and pedigree that makes her more accomplished than every other member of the Angel City attack? Yes, but that was a while ago.
She's 36 years old and months removed from a 2-year ACL recovery. I don't know what to tell you guys.
She no longer possesses the breakaway speed. She still has good touch. She still has good ball sense, good vision. The best use of Kristen Press, the idea of calling them super subs is out and calling them game changers is in. I actually think Kristen Press is one of those players who has in her locker game-breaking stuff, game-changing stuff, but get 600 good minutes out of her this season. Don't try to get more out of her.
If she were onside for that shot, that would have been exactly the thing that Lady and his staff would have wanted out of her.
But also, particularly in this game, you do not need Kristen Press when you are a goal up. If this game had been level, sure, bring Kristen Press on in the 70th or 75th minute. Give a different look.
Even wilder is that, there are people who believe that she should be starting.
I think that doesn't take into account the severity of the injuries she has endured in her career and the age she currently is. Like, I'd be curious to know if Kristen Press thinks Kristen Press should be starting.
1,000%. And again, do you really think Sam Lady is so stupid or so close-minded to the will of the fan base that he wouldn't start her if he thought he could? He's never struck me as the kind of man that obtuse or that bitter or willing to hold a grudge against individual players. I don't think Sam Lady's ever been that guy. And I don't think Mark Parsons is that guy either. The decision-making apparatus around personnel, both among the technical staff and the front office, I think would be thrilled to have a version of Kristen Press that could play 65 minutes a game. But I don't think she's got it. And I think there are very legitimate reasons why, as you have laid out.
What we're doing is essentially rehashing the Alex Morgan debate. It's just the no country for old women thing. As this league changes, as the game changes, as we see generational turnover, and who is more at the tip of the spear in generational turnover than an Angel City team that rolls out Giselle Thompson, Alyssa Thompson, and Kennedy Fuller, who are under a combined 60 years old. Kristen Press, she is break glass in case of emergency, interesting weapon off the bench, but use her minutes sparingly. You know what? She probably could start for Seattle, such as the tireness of their attack. But this Angel City team, it's not even Kristen Press related. It's just, if you want this Angel City team to evolve into something that is really special, you need to be giving these minutes to players who are under contract and with the club for the next handful of years. And you need to be using Kristen Press when they get frustrated or things don't work with them. Kristen Press is plan B. If she is plan A again for some team, I don't think that team's winning very much.
Who should she replace? Is she putting Kennedy Fuller on the bench? Is she putting Riley Tiernan on the bench? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the team looks better in either of those scenarios.
This league is so demanding athletically. This new generation of talent that is out there, if in your mind you're like, Kristen Press is still one of the better wingers in the league, I'm like, have you been watching Emma Sears?
Yeah. That's the standard now.
Yeah. Have you been watching Alyssa Thompson? I think if we had Kristen Press on the pod right now, Kristen Press would be like, yeah, I can't do that anymore.
Re-ink crossover event. Make it happen, Tobin.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm looking at the G+ numbers, and small sample size, it's early. But I'm looking at the attackers who've played at least 25 minutes, because that's the amount of minutes Kristen Press has played. And I'm just looking at dribbling, passing, and receiving value. The accumulation of those three components. Above positional average per 96. Bing, bang, boom. Kristen Press, out of 5 attackers for Angel City with at least 25 minutes, is at the bottom, and it's not close. I feel like that speaks a great volume, and most of it's being driven by a negative 0.13 receiving per 96 value. I just don't see her as a starter, and I don't think that's a problem. Like, that's the other thing. I don't feel like it's such a detriment to the club that she is playing 10 minutes a game.
She is just at a different stage in her career at this point than anyone had envisioned for her when she signed and was their face of the franchise. She just isn't and can't be that player. And if a coach were trying to make her that player right now, that coach would be participating in some coaching malpractice.
If they have pretty decent cap space right now, and we don't think that they do, but let's say maybe they do, then her 1-year deal is perfectly fine for the role that she is being asked to play. 10 minutes a game, game changer. Again, if she's offside, and sorry, folks, I know people want the goal to still count on vibes, but I don't know if I agree. And she was a mile offside.
She isn't even the most offside part of it. It's the entry pass that's like, it's a very offside goal, guys.
All the young kids are talking about how she's mentoring them in training. Who better to mentor Tiernan and Fuller than Kristen Press? Love it. Fantastic. If it's a deal that allowed them some salary cap wiggle room, if you're asking her to come on and change games for 10 minutes, take all of these kids under her wing and like show them the ropes, it's a win. It is a net benefit.
I would like the old Kristen Press to be the current Kristen Press just as much as anybody else would. I don't have any reason to believe that is the current Kristen Press.
We have to face the reality of the situation.
In the minutes we've seen so far, we taken out Claire Emsley for her. Claire Emsley's giving you more defensively. You're definitely not taking off Alyssa Thompson. You're definitely not taking off Kennedy Fuller, who's like having a breakout. There just aren't that many Jess Fishlocks. And I think you could argue like Jess Fishlock isn't Jess Fishlock anymore. There aren't that many Christine Sinclairs. And I think you could argue that Christine Sinclair isn't Christine Sinclair. Alex Morgan was done. At what, 34, 33, 34? Kristen Press is 36.
And none of those players you mentioned had the kind of knee problems that Press had.
Actually, health has been a remarkable through line for a lot of those players. But also, like, Kristen Press is a player who, at her peak, had a lot of young player skills, pace, dribbling, old player skills. Christine Sinclair was born with old player skills. And, like, frankly, Portland shouldn't have been starting her that much last year either. I hope Angel City have enough money to bring in maybe another weapon or two to the club. If not, re-signing Kristen Press is not great business, but she is this club. She just should be used sparingly.
So Angel City, maybe to a little bit of our surprise, is now on notice for us positively about what they might actually be able to develop.
They have one more softie. They get Houston on the road. Look, if they pick up another point there, another 3 points, bank them.
Yep. And then it's Gotham at home, Orlando on the road, and Washington on the road, all in a row.
I think it is fair to say we will know a lot more about this Angel City team on May 3rd.
If you would like to know more about expected own goals, you can subscribe to our Patreon. Do subscribe to our Patreon if you haven't done so already. $6 a month or $60 a year gets you 4 bonus episodes every single month, as well as access to our Discord server and our semi-regular YouTube live streams. And there is a link for that in the show notes. Be sure to rate us 5 stars, review us in your podcatcher of choice, follow us on that podcatcher of choice, tell all your friends about us. Follow us on social media at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. And if you believe we've made an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. We will talk to you on Thursday on Patreon, and then we will be back next Thursday to discuss the international break and the 2 games against Brazil that the U.S. have in L.A. and San Jose. Enjoy those games. We'll be at SoFi Stadium in L.A. on Saturday. If you're going to be there, please come say hi. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Bye.